that is how I started Bowspring, was actually from finally taking a really good look at my family, at myself, and what my daughter was showing me. So it was actually through my child mirroring back to me what shape and what form I wanted to take in myself, both physically, and then that, of course, is going to unfold into all the other areas of your life that are incongruent at the time, and how they can come back to the center, and then how you can have the capacity to be able to expand as a family together.
Welcome to the Village Sessions podcast.
Bringing wisdom home.
We're going to kick it off with a really foundational conversation today. We're going to bring in some of our foundational pieces for our lifestyle, talk about Bowspring, talk about mirroring. These might be familiar words to some of you guys, and then to some of you guys, it might be brand new. So we're just going to have a chat about it all. But first off, what are you drinking right now, Molly?
Typically,
What's in your cup?
Typically, I'm not a black coffee kind of girl, but I'm doing it today. Cheers.
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 Oops.
And
cheers.
I added, she legit, actually, we added some minerals to the coffee with the Ferle
Yes.
brand.
Our friend Megan created Frtil. I think it's been almost probably a year now since it launched. And
Well, the first time we had it was at your retreat.
that's right.
The
So
Rooted Families
less than a
retreat.
year.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, less than a year. She sent the first samples of her family run business to the Rooted Families retreat. And we got to try all 4 of these. So the shilajit, the oysters, the beef liver, the vitamin C. And yeah, she's a mom. She's also a functional practitioner and really has spent a lot of time studying the proper ratios of minerals that really work well with female physiology, and then has been in the bioenergetic health space for quite a while. So her principles of both like honoring the physiology of the body, but then creating this very pure, very potent state with animal-based eating, animal-based foods, and then creating a lot of purity in her products are really kind of like the standouts.
Yeah.
You like the shilajit.
We've talked about the purity piece because this is the only shilajit that I can consume and drink without having some type of like gag response or just some type of like ick response to. This, you put it in a drink. I've been experimenting at home like maybe 2 times a week, putting it in my like iced latte. And it changes it a tiny bit, but like so digestible.
Well, you get used to the flavor. It becomes like the new flavor of your coffee,
Yep.
especially if you add things to it. It's traditionally, I think people used to take this with milk, like raw milk,
Oh, funny.
with countries where it kind of originated in the regular consumption of it. But like a great like full fat source. So a little milk in the coffee is so great. But because it's so pure, it is pretty thick coming out. And so if you're using it for the first time, what do you like to do? You like to add hot water, hot coffee, dissolve it.
So I put it straight in my espresso shot.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it's like
shilajit in there.
perfectly
and then
hot.
Blend it.
Nice.
And then put it over the ice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We have it all in our coffee today. And then beef liver. This is my daughter's go-to beef liver. We actually, yesterday, we caught ourselves, Kyle being like, no, we have to eat dinner first, and then you can have your beef liver, because it was as if it was like ice cream or something.
Oh, wow.
Because
amazing.
she takes it like candy.
I said, she's a G. I've said it once, saying it again.
Gangster. But she will take it right out of the bottle. It is the very first beef liver that she's taken straight out of the bottle, asks for it straight out of the bottle. Other than that, she will only eat whole liver, like straight from the slab or from this bottle. So I think that really speaks to, the high elevation and the purity of it and the taste.
Totally.
Yeah. And then the vitamin C, I love to take these with adrenal cocktails, and then oysters, such a great form and ratio of getting that zinc in with the copper, a little bit of iron. Such a great source of minerals. So that's Frtil. We have a code for you guys if it is your first time ordering or even your second, third time. And you can find that in the description box.
I feel like we're going to talk about the foundations, right? Mm-hmm. One of the foundational pieces that I've witnessed in your life and I've witnessed with you and your kids is nourishing our bodies in the way that we know we need to, right? So the purity in the products that you choose or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be necessarily food nourishment, but the movement that we choose to do, the language that we choose to use, the community that we choose to surround ourselves with. We talk a lot in our specific circles about mirroring, right? And what does this mean when a child is going to be imprinted by their environment, by their caregivers, by their nourishment, potentially all of those things from 0 to 7. And yeah, I feel like the mirroring piece is crucial for understanding how to clean up our own energetics, and it just makes it more impactful. So I would love for, I don't know if one of you guys want to unpack that to start.
Yeah, I mean, we even talked about Geber Mate in the very first episode and the concept of how children are shaped and formed by their environment. And this is very much Michele's language in the shaping aspect. And she was the one that introduced us to the principle that mothers and village used to shape children. And this is, what we teach in Rooted Families is both the energetic state of shaping, but then actually literally getting your hands on a baby's fascia and shaping their glutes up on their bone and
The butt massage.
doing the butt massage, the booty massage. Those who do it, exactly what I'm talking about. And so this principle, how we've very much integrated it into our lives is through a movement called Bowspring. And this was something that I started taking as a class from Michale and Amanda. They came together and basically formed their own dynamic movement from the global Bowspring practice that integrates, like Michele's philosophy on an open breathing body, and then a little bit of polyvagal theory too. Yeah, we can talk about that in a second. And I started that, I guess, a little over 2 years ago. And then how far are you in at this point?
4 years with you, but the crazy part, I actually had a mentor who was in and around Denver.
Yeah.
Which is where this, I guess the wellspring of the movement kind of happened in and around that area. He integrated Bowspring principles into his adjusting. So I've been doing these Bowie, springy, those kind of mechanics in adjusting for like 6-7 years.
Makes so much sense why you were so activated by Michale.
And this is part of our original story. The moment you walked into my practice, we started working with babies. She's like doing all these things, and she said the word bowspring, and I was like, you said what? And then I had just like all of these. It felt like multiple lifetimes were like collapsing into one moment. And so you were the encouragement for me to get very disciplined in a practice of shaping my own body as a practitioner versus just helping people shape their bodies, as a chiropractor.
Well, and then from a mother's, we're going to say something.
I was just going to say, and I think that's so interesting because look at, I'm going to say the incongruence of you as a practitioner going in and making a directional application without you actually having
Embodied.
that solid in your body, or I should say flowing in your body.
Which is rampant.
Right.
As body workers, not chiropractors only, but any type of body work.
Right. And so I say this all the time that choose your body worker wisely because they will shape you to their shape,
Yep.
not another shape or your shape. It'll
And
be
physical
their
shape,
shape.
a mental shape, an
Yes,
emotional shape,
everything.
all the landscapes.
All of that.
Did y'all get that? Maybe rewind 15 seconds a few times until it lands.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that exact same framework applied to motherhood is the process of, so in my experience, my second born was born, and even we were working with you before then with a mentorship program you had done, and then even some work we were doing with Koa, and you providing a picture for me to start looking at the way our family moved, and it still wasn't necessarily clicking until I was ready to like make it click. It was serving me to not make it click for a while. But after Story was born, we were experimenting with hands-on work with Story and shaping her, and she was opening, or let's say working through some fascial rigidity and stuckness, and these are the words I would have used back then. And then she would experience collapse, and she wasn't able to hold. And so finally, it got to the point where the download and you verbally bringing this to me of like, oh my gosh, I am asking my daughter to hold a state of openness that I do not hold myself, that Kyle, my husband, does not hold himself. Therefore, she's breaking rapport with us to be able to hold that shape if we are not holding that as a family.
And at this point, she's only like 4 months old.
Yes.
Right? It's so fresh.
And you had been given the opportunity to do a lip tie release.
Yes.
Or diagnosed with a lip tie and given the opportunity for a release, which you said no.
Correct.
And you decided to, take a different path. And that path is what revealed that to you.
Yes.
Was the lack of alignment, the incongruence, all the lack of calibration in your own body, your own family. And of course she's gonna like mirror that back.
Oh, it was so great how she showed the way
Yes.
there. And then
They just hold up the mirror.
Totally.
They're like, please don't.
Totally. And then finally being like, oh my gosh, our children are literally mirroring back to us. Can we listen? Can we take the act of radical self-responsibility and integrate that into our families? Because at that point, it becomes a whole lot less, you're just chasing before then. And then whenever you're able to integrate self-responsibility and actually look at oneself and how you are moving through the world, you're like, oh, okay, things just got a whole lot more simple. Oh, okay, I can do this.
And so much more effective.
So much more effective.
Also, options open.
Yes.
Like there's like this Pandora's box of options at that point.
Possibilities
Exactly.
abound.
Yeah.
They
Exactly.
just totally abound.
And that would make sense with if you are focused on a problem with your child, it will activate more of this survivalist and nervous system upregulated state as a mother. And yet if it was just you looking at yourself, you would come back into your own center to be able to get there. So that is how I started Bowspring, was actually from finally taking a really good look at my family, at myself, and what my daughter was showing me. So it was actually through my child mirroring back to me what shape and what form I wanted to take in myself, both physically, and then that, of course, is going to unfold into all the other areas of your life that are incongruent at the time and how they can come back to the center, and then how you can have the capacity to be able to expand as a family together.
I'm giggling internally because Living Adjusted was my first child. Like my chiropractic practice was my first baby. And Michelle was essentially just like, if you want to expand, expand your body. Hold the frame in a new way for whatever abundance you're trying to move towards, right?
If you want more possibilities, be able to hold two truths at once. If you want more options, be bi-directional. Go
both
two ways at one time. That opens up your mind to what you did not see consciously before,
Totally.
so that you can actually experience more, because you just were not open to those things before.
And then with those fresh eyes, you can see, quite literally expose yourself to yourself and see how the way you move actually holds your belief systems about life. So the more rigid you are, you can see scarcity in somebody's body.
Oh,
So easy to see now.
so easy.
I mean, they did all of the mirror neuron studies on monkeys, right? And so monkeys they're having the similar expressions to the humans. And I think most of it, you could probably go deeper into this, but most of it has to do with like motor function, like movement, right? And then also the emotional limbic brain. So this is like all the facial expression, the polyvagal things. But this is where the brain is going to light up in the mirror neuroning piece. The most is through movement, which is Bowspring, and also the facial emotional connection that we're receiving from most likely our caregivers most of the time.
So let's get into Bow. Let's get into Bowspring. Do you want to share your experience in the origins of your practice with it? And then,
Yeah. So just because I love giving credit to geniuses and where credit is due, the inventor, creator, Desi Springer, is the one who had this epiphanal like download of the transition from the yoga that she had practiced for many years to this dynamic movement that had a specific algorithm of opening and positioning and bidirectionality and width before length, all of these things that she talks about in relationship to that, and developed a 10-point algorithm around the movement so that it could be taught, right? And I became familiar with the practice when I was still living in Kansas. A patient of mine that was her children were in ALF appliances, and I was doing myofunctional therapy and all of the other modalities with that, the bodywork piece and all that. I was a massage therapist at that point, and all of the other ecological pieces. And she mentioned it to me, and I was like, oh, bookmark that. I'll be back. And once I moved, then I attended my first immersive course, which was really fascinating because this was taught by another teacher in a different location and was a wonderful experience. And it was very challenging. And before that, I had purchased John and Desi's very first online course, and I could only do about 10 minutes of it at a time. It was that, it was
Intense.
that, it was that intense.
yes.
It was that
Stretching for
neuroplastic.
you.
It was that disruptive, right? And so what was really interesting about that week was there were people absolutely falling apart in the class. They were to their edge, over the edge. So I was having to use like all my neurological like stabilizing tools and all the things that, you know, I had already knew, and I'm bringing that to help this teacher who, you know, the class was kind of falling apart. I'm like, okay, what if we do this? You know, maybe try this. And so everybody had kind of come back in, and then we would begin again, as we do. We always begin again, right? And so that was like the beginning. And then I started traveling, like intensive here, class here. Then I moved to Dallas, started my practice there, started a practice in San Antonio, and then met Amanda because she had a Bowspring studio, and I began to take from her. And so that was really great because I would go to Bow every night. And then eventually I closed my practices, moved to Maui, and I'm still practicing. And then one of the things that I wanted to do, I had mentored with Desi, mentored with John, and I wanted to do more of the wonderful Bowie looking like tricks, right? Not happening. It's not going to happen for me. And I finished up my second mentorship with them, and I was talking to Amanda one day. Amanda Cepeda, we'll leave her information in the notes. And so what happened was I just said, can you just take me back to the floor? Polyvagal. Just put me on the floor so that I can feel supported, so that I can feel myself against something and really just go back to the rudiments, just go back to the beginning. So we went fetal and then open and then up, right?
Cool.
Best thing I ever did. And then what I realized was that almost every parent with a child that was experiencing cranial stuff, which if you've been diagnosed with lip and tongue tie, that's all cranial stuff. And we'll talk about that in another episode. And all of that ability to position yourself and hold yourself is very, very foundational to that world, right? It's just really a interruption in the unfurling at birth and the reflex integration and all the posturing that comes on naturally when it's in the field. And then I realized, oh, these children are really just in rapport with their environment. It's ecologically correct for them to mirror their environments.
They're doing a great job.
Awesome. Nailing it. Yeah, just nailing it. And I realized that that in order for them to get the long-term sustainable effects from any treatment they might engage in, having that ecological correctness at home was just an imperative. And that became very foundational to the Mile Wild approach back in the day. And then as I dialed in this parent piece and got the parents involved, I would notice that children would begin to change just rapidly. And
Without touching the kids.
Without touching the kids, no body work, no, external outsourcing or anything like that. They would naturally take on this shape. They would naturally open, the cranial strain patterns would change, the midline anatomy would change, things would begin to change naturally, along with all of the other nourishing pieces like, nutrition, grounding, sun, all of that. So this became another element of nourishment, was the movement piece. So that was really, really big. It was really huge. And the thing that I experienced too after my own near-death experience after a tongue tie release was that the Bowspring practice was actually life-giving to me because I had dialed in everything else. I had done orthodontics twice. I had had 3 ALFs. I had received myofunctional therapy from the best. I was a myofunctional therapist. I had been to the osteopaths. I had been to all the big names. There was nothing missing except me.
Holding it.
Except me holding it.
Yep.
And so then learning to hold myself and be there for me, have my own back, open my back heart, open my front heart at the same time, and all of the light shining down and through and up and out at the same time was like the thing that was missing. And then also, because of the way I learn, my blueprint in the world, how I do things, that foundational experimenter is straight up, how I learned to do that and then began to teach others those principles. The thing that I found super interesting in all of the education that I've had, my curriculum vitae is like pages long from all the training, right? And this was probably the most powerful foundational thing. I was finally congruent. Like, it was like moment when I sat down with you on the floor with the baby, put that baby between us, and then everything started happening. You're like, what is happening right now? And it was me working with that child and imbuing and infusing, and we were dancing. We were doing the dance. And are your eyes getting watery?
Yeah.
Wow.
Cry.
I know.
Wow. Here it comes.
I'll hold it in, but it really did impact me. And I could say this too about my mentor, John, is like the embodiment piece. There's nothing that replaces that. And the transmission of wisdom, there's just like nothing greater than somebody who like is willing to put themselves in the test tube and embody whatever they're teaching.
Yeah.
And then all the other pieces that come along with it.
Yeah. It was really humbling when I realized that I was willing to die to birth this. And I had beautiful births, even 3 miscarriages. And I'm willing to die to put this together. So fascinating to me. And yet did not. So here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are.
You about did a couple times?
Yeah. Yeah. 4. But the last one was the most impactful. And what's fascinating to me is all of the neurological training that I've had, which is freaking tons, right? Where we talk about mirror neurons and entrainment, the breathing, the all of that.
NLP with rapport.
All of
keeping,
that,
everything.
but especially like I can think of a couple of specific trainings where they would focus on the mother's breathing and all this. And I kept thinking, she doesn't have access to her diaphragm.
She can't even breathe.
She can't even breathe. So where does that come from?
Everybody take a deep breath.
Right? and then what do you do when you go to an airway dentist? Then they're like, oh, your airway's so small you can hardly breathe. Well, then what are you going to do? You're going to hold your breath. You're not going to breathe. So nobody's breathing, right? And it's not because they can't. It's because you've told them they can't, and they don't know how to access it naturally, passively, right?
And hold it.
And hold it and hold the form that naturally breathes passively, right? So the really interesting thing about the mirror neuron conversation is, of course, Molly made reference to the early studies with animals, and then there was the early research with humans that was very deconstructive. It was very reductionistic, materialistic, very scientific, imperialistic. So it had to be reduced. All the invariables had to be removed and had to be reduced to, oh, this, then this, oh, this, then this, which is really kind of a curse to our society because now we only
That's the gold
want this
standard.
and this. This means this, or this gives us this. We can't hold multiple possibilities, which just makes that's the thing about my brain that makes me a complete and total freak is that I can hold multiple possibilities at one time.
Total
It's
freak.
very easy for me.
Totally.
Very easy for me.
Totally.
And like multi-perspectival just all day. Just spin the prism. I got this. And then the thing about that was, oh, very scientific, imperialistic, very reductionistic. And so then it became how babies registered danger from the mom or these other emotions, right? So limbic, thought, expression, so muscle activation, right? And the babies, there's plenty of evidence that happens. But what we were missing, I think, from that is what the infant's bringing to the table. They're not just a blank slate of reflexes, right? There's this consciousness there that's just now being acknowledged. And the other part of that is that more recently, like in the 70s, there were a couple of researchers that began to talk about movement, not in the way that we're talking now, but began to talk about movement, began to talk about like the intersubjectivity is what they call it, of the co-creation of the dyadic experience. So now we're talking about dyadic consciousness. And what's interesting is from the IBCLC perspective, that's where the word dyad comes from. It's the
Baby
mother-baby,
dyad, yep.
right? Now, we form dyads with other people too. You know, intimacy is expressed in all kinds of ways, but the intimacy and the co-creative experience in the realm of dyadic consciousness has to do with this intersubjectivity and this creation of the responses and all of that. And then also you add in the layer of the safety piece of the child trying to stay in rapport for the safety that's innate. That's hindbrain all day long, right? That's just it's just the way we're mammal, evolutionary equipped, right? So when we've got that rapport building, I have to look like you so that I'm safe, takes it to a whole other level. And when we add that piece in, then it becomes, to me, so obvious and imperative that if the mother does not address herself, then, and remember, she's entrained to her mother, who's entrained to her mother. So now we're
How far back are we
we're
going?
putting the brakes on the lineage downslide, and we're saying, oh, whoa, okay, hold on. And then you're like, start backing it up the mountain now, right? It's no small thing when you, at any age, when you break rapport with the patterns of your family, whether it's the way you look, the way you speak, your education, the way you hold your body, all of those things, it's always going to have some type of repercussions. And I think that was the thing where when I realized, oh, the depth of the and 180 is that, yeah, you could have to die to a lot. And are you willing to do that? And I was like, yeah, I'm ready. You know, I'm ready to do that. And when we talk about infants in that space, Molly, you've sort of illuminated to the world what's possible with your own child in the way he's shaped. And, you know, I'm always like, look at those feet. They're so straight. Or look how, you know, look how wide, blah, blah, blah. You've been bowing with him on your belly since he was 4 days old, 5 days old, right? And in the belly too.
Yeah, and pregnancy.
And
birth.
birth.
Pregnancy.
And birth. So all of those are signatures, frequency signatures in the sacred geometry that we're installing and instilling through all of that.
Totally.
Yeah. So Molly, when Kul was born and he was in like the first several days after birth, We went in and assessed breastfeeding
Yeah.
because we're
Day 3.
the trajectory is functional, so we're headed toward the functional trajectory. And I'm looking at him because I typically evaluate that differently than most practitioners because I look at different things. Then I don't go straight to the tongue. I don't look at, I'm looking at other things, right? And so when we went in to look at other things, we were working with the cranial base and the hips and other parts, and of course the lingual frenum. We looked at that, and I told you, I said, if you were to take him to anybody else, they would tell you that he was tied, and you knew right. You're like, of course not.
Yeah. My baby's not
That was
tied.
a straight hell no. Yeah, and then what I know from working with the body is what's possible when you get everything dialed in, right? And you begin to use that tissue and it changes like within hours and days and just everything begins to unfold. You've taken, once we got everything established and you were beginning to shape him in the way that we talk about postural blueprint method, you created so many more possibilities for him by doing that. And that to me is just picturesque. It's just straight ideal.
Yeah, and I do think, well, so much of that was with the support of you, my village, the people that were mirroring and showing me that, like, okay, you can do this, right? This is an option. You can shape your baby, move your own body, create an environment that'll allow him to bloom into this like open, wide, beautiful bodied boy. So thank you guys for that, first of all. And I think there are still moments that I have the opportunity now to up a level into that. Like, we're in a little season right now that's so funky for us. And I'm like, okay, I'm going back to the basics though. I'm like, what are we doing? What about the inversions? What about my own body? What about our environment? What's changing in our ecology? How much time are we spending together if this is what we want? Does he need us together? Like, I'm assessing these areas of my life. And at the same time, I feel like the space that I create in my body allows me to have the capacity to accept. There's an acceptance piece of saying, ooh, I'm seeing a symptom. And I could like literally make it mean many things. I could make it mean anything. What do we want to make this mean?
Yeah.
And going back to, you talk a lot to me about this, about like being stuck, being curious, being like all of these little phases, right? And so having my own body in a way that I can hold the capacity for multiple right possibilities, right?
Sure.
Multiple right possibilities. I feel like this is where the meat and potatoes of mirroring comes in, because he gets to see me have that experience.
Yeah.
And then, cool. Like, what are we gonna do here? How are we gonna transmit information? How are we gonna transmute whatever symptoms are having? Can we alchemize these symptoms? Can I accept the reality as it is and say, okay, cool. I'm actually not going to make this mean what they think that society says I should make it mean. I'm going to create a different reality.
Right.
I'm going to create a different experience, create a different response. So we've had just multiple opportunity. Like, motherhood is endless with that, I feel like. And not even just motherhood, marriage and like business. Right. And man, you could go into every category of life with that. But having the frame holding in these moments, taking risks, changing the way that you're going to handle a situation or respond to a situation, and then allowing your child to watch you do that,
right,
I think is literally like the gold.
Right.
You holding your frame, this being the bow framework, you holding your frame from the inside out, where no matter what comes up, Michelle talks about this a lot, does it knock you down? Because that center of gravity and that frame is in a state of collapse. So it's almost like waiting for something to knock you down in that way.
Or you're creating it.
Or you're creating it over and over again.
Yep.
Because that feels good to get
Resonance.
knocked down. And yeah, and like what Michelle was saying earlier, like or she talked about this a lot, but just like the feeling of bumping up against something. And yeah, the ability to hold your frame from the inside out, and then what that's informing to your child non-verbally to say like, I'm here for all of this. I'm here for all of this. And then the multiple options, like with what Michelle was saying earlier, to be able to hold multiple options for how you want to do things is such a beautiful place to be in motherhood.
And it literally changes their body. Like I can't
Yes.
I can't express that probably differently than those words. But their physical, and once you have an experience with this, you getting in a Bowspring class or whatever, however you choose to engage with this mirroring element, and you witness their glutes raising or their body bowing more, or you did like 3 inversions and then you got on the floor and
Their
you crawled with
shoulders
them
getting
and,
wide.
and their body changes. Like,
Their neck getting longer and their head getting straighter.
you
It's
know how
just
many
amazing.
stories in my practice, only in my practice, so this is like a small pool of people, get on the floor. So if their baby's like delayed crawling or delayed rolling or doing something, I'm like, please get on the floor with them for the next 3 days. Do the things that you want them to do.
Yes. Show them.
And then they're like, bam, the next time you see them, they're like, oh yeah, it was no big deal. And I'm like, okay, it could be no big deal.
Right.
Right? We just want to, let's show our kids what we want them near and model.
That's so symbolic to even thinking about the picture of like just towering above something and judging it.
And then
Judging.
also snipping or lasering it.
Yeah.
Just that
Yeah.
energetic too.
Yeah.
Well, I think what that is in society, we, for the last over 100 years, we've been taught to look outside of ourselves for the answer or to look to someone else for their wisdom instead of listening on the inside. And then the other thing is with the way that our education system has changed, right? No more critical thinking, no more cross-correlative thinking. It's all like question, answer, question, answer. One answer is correct. Everything else is wrong. You'll get in trouble if you don't pick the right answer, right?
Chiropractic boards, the board exams are like the prime time example.
Oh, boy.
Of this. I'm just like,
Are you kidding me?
Even
Yeah.
even in chiropractic school.
Nuts.
well, it's a national licensing
Right.
exam. So of course there's only one answer. That's right.
Of course.
Wow.
I'm
Right.
just like, okay.
Wow.
Cool.
So we have that. And then also the uncomfortability or the discomfort that comes up for mothers who have never been held in a place to be able to introspect or look inside. Then the tendency is to make the child wrong or diagnose outside of yourself. So you decontextualize right away and you take that thing out of context, you define it, you treat it, and then maybe it goes back in, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But the decontextualization and the removal of a certain snippet of something to make it right again is a misnomer. It's actually not correct. It doesn't create wholeness. It doesn't create balance by doing that.
What do you think the reason behind that? Do you feel like it's just safety for internal safety, or to keep a narrative, or?
I think it's very consistent with the pushing forward of the allopathic system. So the allopathic medical system is a very capitalistic, corporate-like machine that is fed by something being wrong. And
Totally.
in our
Liability, procedure, reproducibility,
all of that.
education,
right.
100%.
And then before that, we would have put things in context. Well, what did you eat? Or how did,
Where do you live?
or an
happened in your
emotional
life?
piece, right? Or this thing happened. Of course you're upset, blah, 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 blah. So there would have been this consideration of life that went along with the observing. But now it's very, well, something's wrong with them or something's wrong with that. And then that is somehow I'm immune to.
Completely.
I have nothing to do with that.
Take that into an example of like motherhood, because this is who we primarily interact with, right?
I mean, the classic tongue tie example, or I would say, digestion is like a huge one that comes up in my space a lot. Baby has digestive issues. It has nothing to do with me or the fact that I'm angry at everybody.
But it might have to do with I need to restrict dairy.
Yes. It might be, I just need to cut out, I just need to starve myself a little bit and then
Everything will be better.
and then everything will be better. Yeah. Let's deplete, let's like suck dry basically. And in reality, that is almost perpetuating the experience even more.
Yeah.
What's another example that comes up for you?
I think sleep. I think one of the things that's really prevalent now is secondary gains. So we get something from some not getting something.
Totally.
I see this with sleep a lot, where they're like, well, we've done everything for sleep, and we did this, and we did that, and we did that, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you getting from this child not sleeping? And immediately you can see it, and I'm like, I'm gonna let you sit with that for a hot second. You don't have
Yes.
to answer
Take
me
a
right
minute,
now.
take a
Take
minute.
your time.
Yes.
Take your time. And then you check back in a day or two later, and I'm like, so how's it going? Oh, we're sleeping now. I'm like, oh, amazing.
Should I share my personal example with this, with sleep, with Story? First few months of her life, I would need to stay with her in bed after I put her to like nursery sleep. I know I talked to Molly about this too, but I would, we all co-sleep and I would nurse her to sleep. And then I'd be like, I can't roll away and spend time with my husband at night because she's going to keep waking. And sure enough, I would go out into the living room sometimes.
Wake
and
up.
then whoop, she would cry. I'd be like, sorry, I gotta go back in. And just completely avoiding looking at the picture of my marriage dynamics at the time. And so Kyle and I found very creative ways to avoid each other. And that was one way that we did it. And when I recognized it, she started sleeping.
How about that?
Just the recognition, just the conscious recognition. Remember me sharing that with you? I was like, oh.
It's so powerful just to even acknowledge it and watch things shift in your field. And you're like, and the cool thing about it is you don't have to make anybody wrong.
Totally.
And it doesn't have to be bad. And there doesn't have to be a judgment. And we don't have to project. It's okay. Just say it. But so many people have never been in a space where they can just speak it, and then somebody doesn't come in and make meaning about it, and then there's some type of repercussion because of it. There's always a fear there, right? So of course you're going to pack it away. Of course you're going to hide it. Of course you're going to be manipulative with it, because that's the path of safety with it. And
Totally.
it's serving you.
And then your kids are going to show up with that same piece and just hold the mirror for you to see.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. My overall experience with when parents, especially mothers, especially in the 0 to 6 range, will really begin to look at their ecology, which is the relationship of the being with the environment, right? And really start to consider all of the power that's there and that they have available to them. It's startling to most people just how quickly things can change. And yet it's available to them.
Totally. And you always say too is like nature is the lever that moves the world, and so is movement and nature. So those two, if you're struggling listening to this right now, it's like, okay, assess those two pieces of your life. And like, what can you shift? What do you have dominion over right now in this exact moment?
Probably more than you think.
More than you think. And the more that you take a step towards those shifts, the more possibilities that will open.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. It's super potent. It's the thing that for us to move forward into, we will have to embrace, because the systems, the allopathic systems that we go to fix it are quickly running out of juice. The gas is coming out of that totally, because there's so much change going on around us that the adaptation slows when you stop it to make something wrong. But if you can adjust quickly, change a sail, change the rudder, whatever, like just like that,
Little alignment.
little alignments, then and that's why I love the Awaken class, is because it mimics sleep, and sleep is all about suspension, standby, and the micro spaces.
So good.
So when you can hold the tone on standby at night in the micro spaces, create those spaces and stay charged up, it's a whole different world.
Yeah. Your battery is literally charging with a new quality.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
So do we want to tell people where they can begin with Bow if it's something calling to them right now? We can put in the description box the link to the classes. And what do you want to share about the classes?
I'll say this, if you're looking at taking this mirroring journey with your children, I'll say that one of the things that I've heard people say about Bow, depending on who they're taking from, is that they might have back pain or some type of issue. I will tell you that your teacher should be calibrating you and cueing you in ways that keep the base ribs full. That's your number one. And if that's not happening, just like I said with the body worker piece, right? That person is going to teach to their shape. There are teachers that will cue very faithfully to the algorithm. Those are your people. And this is one of the reasons I love the Awaken class, is because Amanda is so fastidious about cueing to the algorithm initially. And she's very, very sensitive to helping people not experience discomfort as they open. We're not about the tricks. Let's just get into the algorithm. Let's get into the microspaces. Let's really neuroplastically get that algorithm embedded in the body.
Get the
and
foundation.
Then go from there, be foundational about it. So if you've tried it in the past and you've had experiences where you've had pain, you need to get with a teacher who knows how to cue that foundation, that the ribs, and get you to where you're unfurling in a way that's right for you.
So good.
Yeah.
That feedback loop is huge.
Very big.
Amanda does one-on-one as well. But yeah, those classes, I take them 2 times a week. That's how I began as well. And then I've, moved around with 1 time a week. I'm back with 2 times a week in the live classes with Amanda and Michelle. And we also have those classes integrated into Rooted Families.
Yep.
Also navigating the curves is for specifically for pregnant women. And she cues Molly, which is super fun.
One-on-one. And we do on the floor, on the knees, standing, and on the back for pregnancy and those, and then navigating the curves.
Amazing.
Yeah.
For Rooted Families, a lot of that she was cueing us on the floor and then hands and knees as well. I love those classes. So everything will be
Such a good resource.
Yeah, 100%. Everything will be in the description box. And that wraps up first meat and potatoes episode. Any closing thoughts?
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to some Shilajit.
We'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.